Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by your Vanderbilt Alumni Association. My name is Drew Webb, Assistant Director of Student Alumni Engagement at the Alumni Association, and I'm so glad that all of you could join us today. Today's webinar will last around 45 minutes with time at the end for questions. Please feel free to type your questions as you have them into the question box on the side panel of your screen, and we will have a Q&A session after the presentation. We are recording today's presentation and will share the recording and slides with you via email later this week. Many of you know our presenter today from previous alumni career offerings here at Vanderbilt, and I'm excited she's back with us for our first webinar of 2018. Hallie Crawford is a career coach, speaker, and author based in Atlanta, whose company Create Your Career Path helps people find their dream job. Hallie is a Vanderbilt alumna and graduated with degrees in interpersonal communication and psychology. For more than 10 years, Hallie and her team have helped people achieve their career goals. She's published numerous books and is regularly featured as a career expert in the media. In addition to Vanderbilt, many other universities, including the University of Georgia, the University of Colorado, and Georgia Tech, enlist Hallie's expertise for career programming. I'm very pleased to now turn over this afternoon's presentation to Hallie.
Thank you, Drew. That was perfect. And thank you, everyone, for being here today, especially on what may be a snow day for you all. I have to tell you, I'm in Atlanta, and we got the snow that Nashville just had a couple of days ago. We had a snow day yesterday and today. So I'm actually working from home because no one's going anywhere. And we really appreciate your time being here today, and we will give you a lot of great advice as we go. Okay, so we are going to be talking about how to make a career change this year. And one of the first things I want you all to know here, this is a funny picture of me. I'm on the far left when I was in my 20s. My mom is in the middle, and this is my sister as well. And when I was in my early 20s, I was living in my mother's basement. I was very depressed and unhappy. I had 5 different jobs by this point in completely different industries, and I had no idea who I was and what I wanted to do in terms of my career. So I know firsthand how hard this career transition kind of issue or situation can be, because I went from living in the basement and finally my mom said, you know, Hallie, I love you, but you got to get out of here. We made a plan to move on. I went from that to having my own coaching practice, and it's actually been over 17 years. Drew, I have aged a lot. It's been over 17 years that we've been coaching. I'm 44 and I have a 10-year-old son. And my coaching practice is one of the most fulfilling things for me in my life. I am passionate about what I do. I love it. And I'm passionate and enthusiastic about helping people figure out and get in the right job for them. We have a great satisfaction rating with our clients. It's 98%, and just a great track record with helping people define their dream job, but also make whatever transition it is that they want. It could be a promotion. It could be, I want to stay in the same role or in the same industry, but I just need to get into a different work environment, into a different organization or company. So please know that all of these tips today for you, they go across the board for any kind of career change that you want to make this year, okay? So there are 3 basic components, we'll say, to making a career change, okay? And these are pretty basic and straightforward if you take a look at the slide here. Who are you? Where are you going? And how will you get there, okay? And this is basically what we're going to be talking about today. Here is our agenda. There are basically 4 steps that we're going to talk about today to help you figure out how to make a successful and effective career change this year. And these are the 4 steps right here. We're going to talk about defining your direction and how to do that in the most effective way. Talk about conducting informational interviews, developing your brand and materials, and writing your transition plan as well. So this is where we're going in the next 45 minutes here, give or take. And if you would like a copy of the presentation, please feel free to email me at this email address at the bottom. I'm happy to send it to you as a PDF so you don't feel like you have to be frantically taking notes the whole time, okay? All right, so let's look at this next slide. This is kind of an intense picture. It looks like this woman's kind of pulling her hair out, right? Here's the deal. Why do we need to talk about making a career change, right? Because 80% of professionals are not passionate about what they do. The deal is here, and then Drew, in just a second here, we'll do this first poll, is that every few years, about 3 to 5 years, the Gallup organization or the Conference Board or Right Management, they do these surveys of professionals and how satisfied they are in their jobs. And unfortunately, the numbers are always pretty high. Too many people are not in the right career fit and need to or want to make a career change. So this is why this topic obviously is really important, because we spend so much of our lives at work, so much time, that we can't feel frustrated about what we're doing all the time. It's just not acceptable, okay? So we want to check in with you here, Drew, if we can do this first poll. Curious how many people love what they do who are on the call today. And you can think of it as love what you do or enjoy it or whatever it is. But the majority of the time, let's say, you enjoy what you're doing. So let's just do this poll. And then, Drew, if you would read out the results, that would be great, because for some reason I always have trouble kind of finding them on the screen here.
Yeah, it looks like we're about 70% no, 30% yes.
Okay, which is part of why you're here, right?
Now it's 75 no, 25% yes.
Got it. Okay, so even more. So too many people, I guess for you all that are not satisfied, please know that you're not alone. This happens to too many people. And the good news is, what we're going to talk about today, is it's possible to love what you do. This is me. I love what I do all day, every day. And it's been 17 years of doing that. I will tell you, and then I'm actually going to pull up this next slide here while I'm talking. I will tell you that this isn't Pollyanna, though, either. There are days that, yes, I would rather not get out of bed and be independently wealthy and not have to work, right? But even if that was the case, I would still do some amount of coaching, because it gives me that sense of passion and purpose and so much meaning in my life. But I do compromise on certain things. So one of the things I want you to know, that it is possible to make this transition and get into something that is a better fit. But it takes a lot of time and effort and a lot of thought. You can be successful, but you've got to work at it and be committed, okay? And then the second thing is to know that you will have to compromise to a certain extent, right? There's no perfect scenario that's absolutely perfect. There are days when I'm frustrated by my work because there's certain tasks that, I don't necessarily want to perform. That's how it's always going to be. But the deal is, and this is what I want for you all, is that the good so far outweighs the bad that you barely notice the bad stuff. That's how it is for me. The majority of what I do, like 80% of the time, 85% of the time, it's fantastic. I'm doing something that I really want to do. So the percentage is the right way. And the other thing is that when you are choosing where you compromise versus feeling like you just got sucked into something and you don't know where the time went, that makes a huge difference too. So when I was thinking about coaching and thinking about having my own business, it was like, okay, well, my income and my revenue is going to fluctuate. Am I okay with that? And I happen to be okay with it because one of my values actually is risk. And so I'm good with taking on a certain amount of risk. And for me, having that compromise, if you will, was so worth having my own business, being able to, have my own office, pick up my son from school, all of that. The good so far outweighs the bad. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage for that for you all, so that it's not just like, oh, do what you love and the money will follow. That does, have an element of truth in it. But I'll tell you, I worked very hard to get to where I am. It just didn't feel like work as much. That's the thing. So it's not like it's snap your fingers and it's always perfection. Okay. So one of the things that I want to bring up here, take a look at this slide, is we're going to talk about how to define your direction by identifying what your ideal career is in the first place, okay? And I'm going to talk about this model here for just a second to kind of walk you through it for a moment, and then we're going to talk about identifying your career values as well. So in order to define your direction, this is where do you want to go? You need to understand what your goal is first, right? And what your career goal is. What role are you looking for? What industry, all of that. We have our clients start down here with the fulfillment piece of the model. They move to the left, enjoyment, strengths. They go up to education, experience, up here to personality. We do work environment with them, and then we finish with compensation. So you're kind of going this way up and then to the end with the model. We do this for a reason. The fulfillment piece of the model is where our clients get the most career ideas, and they get a sense of, what's going to be meaningful for them in some way, shape, or form. So we always start with this one first, in part because of that, but also because the fulfillment piece impacts every other part of the model and vice versa. If this piece is out of whack, the rest of the pieces aren't going to work. If you're not leveraging your strengths on a regular basis, the ones you want to leverage, you're not going to be a happy camper. So all of these need to be in place, and they're built upon the fulfillment piece. The reason why these pieces are kind of falling into place is what we're doing with our clients is we're building the kind of the picture of what they want their dream job to be like as we walk through these pieces. And it's like a puzzle where the pieces fall into place over time. We're brainstorming ideas all along the way, but at a certain point with them, we're narrowing down their ideas based on practicality, education, and experience. What's realistic? And am I going to get paid enough with, all of these career options or not? I'll just tell you about these briefly. The fulfillment is the meaning, like we said. The enjoyment is the tasks that are like the icing on the cake, the additional things that you like to perform. For me, this would be coaching is my main thing. That's fulfillment here in this piece. Enjoyment is I get to do a little bit of marketing and writing and presentations in person. I enjoy those, but I do not want to do them all the time. I had a marketing job before and I hated it. So you need to be clear about which tasks go into enjoyment versus fulfillment. These are just part of the time, okay? You need to identify and understand what your strengths are. We like using the StrengthsFinder assessment at strengthsfinder.com in order to help our clients determine and understand what their strengths are. You need to look at your education. What has that, brought to the table for you? What did you learn? And I'll tell you this. At first, I thought, gosh, what I do is, not as relevant to my undergraduate degree, but it absolutely is. When I started thinking about the classes I really gravitated towards in college at Vanderbilt, it was those psychology and interpersonal communication classes. Those were the best for me and most enjoyable. Then you look at your past experience and say, what have I enjoyed in the past experience-wise? That can give you some ideas of, what you want to have in your job. And then finally, you need to consider your personality type. Am I more introverted or more extroverted? And what does that mean with the type of role I should be in, okay? And how does my personality type interact with, or vice versa, the work environment? What's the right work environment for me? Is it a large company or small company? Is it, really creative and kind of out of the box, or more traditional and have more, process, okay? And then finally, we look at compensation to determine the right career path. So these are the things that you need to consider. And I'll say one more thing, and then we'll move on to the next slide here, and then Drew will do the second poll on the next slide. But here's the deal, everybody. Like, none of these it's not rocket science, right? You're probably like, oh, yeah, this makes sense. These are the pieces you need to consider, right? But what happens to people is sometimes they don't know how to fill them out. They don't really know, how do I figure out what's fulfilling to me? I don't really know how to determine that. Or I'm not really sure what the right work environment is or what my strengths are. So one of the common problems is they don't know how to fill this out for themselves, A. And then B, another problem is that people too often choose a career path maybe based on 3 or 4 of these pieces, but they forgot to consider the rest of them. Because nobody goes into a job, right, saying, I'm going to hate this job, let me take it, right? That's just not what we do, typically at least. But what happens is they may have thought, oh, this is good, for my strengths, I'll, be good at it, and it's the right work environment, and maybe even the right compensation, but they're like, gosh, there's no meaning in it. Like, I'm doing really well at this, but I don't have a sense of accomplishment every day or achievement. And so that's what happens is the rest of the model just kind of gets left out. So please know that the situation that you're in, if you're unhappy, is normal. And this is probably what happened. It's just a couple of the pieces might be out of whack. And that's what you need to determine for yourself, is figure out which ones are in place, which ones are not aligned or out of whack, and how do you fix those ones, okay? So let's talk about step number 1. On the model right before, we were talking about this a little bit already. But one of the things you need to do that will help you start to brainstorm career ideas, this is one of the beginning exercises we do with clients, is to identify your career values. And I'll talk about these in just a minute. Drew, if you can go ahead and do the poll.
Mm-hmm. So I did these I did 2 questions.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I'm glad you kind of changed them based on what I had said too, because it makes it a little bit better. and we ask this, everybody, as you're answering, there's a difference in our book from personal values and career values. Your personal and career values may overlap, by the way, and several of them may be kind of the same, but so there's a difference between the two. Yeah, tell us.
Here are the results from the first question.
Mm-hmm. Will you read them out?
Yeah, it's 69% said that yes, they know what their values are, and 31% said no, they don't know what their values are. So I'm going to flip to the career values question now.
Okay, good. So most people know their values. That's awesome. You guys are ahead of the game. And thanks for reading it, Drew. I always have trouble seeing it. I click on the wrong thing and then Sorry about that, guys. Dog has something to say today. It's snow day. Appreciate your patience. Snow day it is.
All right. And for the career values, it looks like it was about a 30-70 split. 31% said yes, they know their career values, and 69% said no, they don't know their career values.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Drew, for doing that. That's so perfect. So good for the people that know their career values. That's awesome. And reminder that the career values go in the fulfillment piece of the model, and you want to make sure that the work environment honors those values, your tasks that you perform honor those values, okay? And the good news is for people that don't know them, that's okay. That's why we're here to talk about this, okay? So just really quickly, let me tell you how we define career values. Basically, their values are your guidepost to fulfillment, and your career needs to be aligned with your career values, okay? And the way that we define them and have people look at them is not just choosing from a list. Actually, let me go to this next slide here for a second, because then we're going to talk about how to define these in just a moment. If you need help with your career values specifically, just email me, and there's a values worksheet that I will send you to help you not just with your personal values, but your career values as well. So feel free to email me for that. Okay, so values are your guidepost to fulfillment. Here's how we begin to define them, okay? You need to consider them, and the reason why they're important is because most people want to have a sense of meaning in some way, shape, or form in their career. If the word passion is too strong for you guys and you're like, no, it's okay to say, hey, I want to have a sense of meaning or a sense of achievement or success. Whatever word works for you, that's fine, okay? But it's important to make sure that you have some sense of reward or fulfillment in your job. How do we define it? Here are 3 different ways on this slide that you can begin to determine and identify what your career values are. Write about and just think about. So this is one homework assignment. You guys need to get out your pen and paper here, okay? One homework assignment would be just to write for a few minutes about how you define success. What does success mean to you? Is it a certain amount of money? Is it that you have the corner office? Is it that, no, I'm helping people? Or are you helping businesses? Or are you working with numbers and helping companies financially? Or no, I want to help people like through therapy with their emotional problems. Like, think about how you define success. We all define it differently, but just thinking about that and kind of blurting it out on paper, really helpful. It will start to give you a sense of what's important to you in terms of your values. The second thing that we do with our clients is what we call a peak experience exercise. It's great. We have them think about what was a moment in time or a period of time in your life that was a peak experience for you. Like you felt great, you were rocking and rolling, okay? It could be anything, personal or professional. We tend to gravitate towards having our clients do personal experiences first, though, because that's where they'll really get that sense of values of who they are as a person, and not just saying, well, it should be achievement and it should be this and this. Be careful of shoulds with values. You don't want to write anything down that you feel like you should write down. It really needs to come from the heart. So what you do with the peak experience is you think about that situation or scenario or time frame and write about it. And you need to focus everybody on what was cool about it for you, not just the details like, oh, I was on a trip to Italy with so-and-so and so-and-so, and we ate this food, blah, blah. What was cool about it? And I'll give you some examples here in terms of what might come out of this. So a trip to Italy, several people may have that as their peak experience. It's one of mine, okay? But based on the different people's values, and what their priorities are, different people may say completely different things about their values. One person might say, well, I love the planning of it. Like, I love organizing trips and providing enjoyment to other people, So their value might be about more organizing and planning, and gosh, should they be an event planner or maybe a project manager, for example? Another person might say the thing I loved about the trip was the food and the culture there, because they like history and, sociology and that kind of stuff. Another person might say the beauty of the art and everything else. Those are their values. So those are just some examples of personal values. And then you say, okay, which ones need to be career for me? Creativity and beauty, does that need to be in my job? And these other, organizing, or the food one, is that about, do I want to be a chef? No, that's not it. But you would think about, what is it about the food and the cooking? Like, it's bringing people together maybe, or creating an experience for people, okay? So that's how you do the second one here on the slide, the peak experience. The third way that you can identify values are things that you can't live without, that are really important to you, or things that really bother you or aggravate you. Like if injustice bothers you or aggravates you, or poverty or something like that, there may be some possible values inside of those things that are frustrating for you, okay? And I just gave you some examples a moment ago. Some other ones could be authenticity, education, creativity. Some people might say a value for me is working with numbers. I just love that. And they might need to be like a financial analyst or mathematician or something like that. So your values can start to give you some possible career ideas. But a lot of times this is where I need to step in with my clients and help them. They'll give me their list of values and say, okay, Hallie, are these right? And now what do I do? And so I'm happy to talk with anyone in just a free, 15-minute call to help you kind of identify your values, but also translate those into career ideas. So feel free to just email me about that if you need it. And the next piece, kind of the third piece of defining your direction, is to dig into your dreams a little bit. And I'll show you this next slide here. You guys will kind of laugh. In terms of defining your direction, the reason why there's a mermaid here, I wanted to be a mermaid at Weeki Wachee when I was a kid. I grew up in Florida, and I thought this was so cool, like floating around in the water all day long. That just looks so neat, right? Well, it's not the most practical, career path, of course. But when I thought about this, and this is what I want you all to do, is even if your childhood dreams or current dreams are not practical and realistic, you're not going to get paid enough, you're not qualified to do those things, dig underneath what is appealing about those things for you? Because when I dug underneath this one, I identified some values. There's a little bit of risk in what they do, right? And there's also a little bit of like the entertainment and the beauty. And I love giving presentations, right? So that's partially kind of entertaining. I tend to be more animated when I do these kinds of things, and that's part of the deal and one of my values. And then also, I actually like designing my PowerPoint slides. Hopefully they look good for you guys, but I like that creative piece of what I do as well. So even if the actual career path, guys, is not the right thing for you and not practical, think about what is appealing about it underneath for you and see if those values can be present in a different career path that might actually work, okay? So just as a final thought here for step number 1, identifying your ideal career, going through this model helps you identify everything that you want. And you want to use this list here, or these boxes, to guide your list making. What strengths do I want to use? What kind of work environment? This will help you cover all of your bases when you're writing out what you think you want career-wise, okay? Now let's move to step number 2, leverage informational interviews. The reason why we have people do this is that it can help them narrow down their ideas, their career ideas, based on what we just talked about. But it also will help you expand your network for the job search piece of it, okay? We find that up to 80% of the people we work with either don't know what an informational interview is, or actually the majority of the time, they don't understand the complete process, like how to conduct it effectively, A to Z, okay? So we're going to talk about this today for just a moment. Okay, sorry, I thought I would move too quickly on the slides. What is an informational interview? So let's discuss this for a second. And then Drew, on the next slide, we're going to have our third and last poll, okay? So an informational interview, if any of you don't know, it's a one-on-one conversation, either in person, over the phone, or on Skype, with someone who works in an industry, everybody, a company, or a role you would like to work in. So you can go for all three of these. Any one of these counts. You can talk to somebody about what it's like to work at their company and if it would be a fit for you. You can talk to them about an industry or a particular role, even if it's not the company that you want to work in. Okay, so these are the three things that you can ask about. These interviews are a great way to decide on your next career moves, decide if the career paths that you're considering are the right ones, help you focus your aspirations, or figure out if a company or role would be a good fit for you. It's talking to the horse's mouth about it, or whatever that saying is, if I said it right. What is it really like? What is a day really like in that field? And get that inside perspective before you jump in, okay? For job seekers, it's also a great way to network your way into an organization, okay? Now, I will tell you, oh, and sorry, the last thing I wanted to say about this is informational interviews are also a great way to practice your interview skills without conducting a formal job interview as well, kind of gets you going with it. I will tell you, and then I'll talk about this slide here, that when you're reaching out to people, everybody, some people are going to say no, and some people are going to ignore you. That's just part of the process. We have found, though, that our clients are always pleasantly surprised that more people respond to them than they thought they would. They're kind and helpful. And also, everybody, it's a law of numbers. It's just like sales. You'll get maybe a 10 or 20% return. So you do need to reach out to a lot of people in order to get some people to meet with you. That's just part of the deal. And by the way, the Vanderbilt Alumni Network is a fantastic resource to tap into in order to, find these people to talk to. They'll be more likely to respond to you if when you email them in the subject line, it says fellow Vanderbilt alum. Okay? So just keep that in mind. One of the things that we find is that informational interviews are still one of the most underutilized tools in people's job search. Our clients are like, I don't want to do it. And we'll talk about the obstacles in just a moment. But I'm curious here if we can do the poll, Drew. How many people have conducted an informational interview before, even if it's just one? I'm just curious. I think the numbers do get better over time, as people start to understand these more, but they're still lower than I would like typically.
So it looks like 74% of our participants have conducted an informational interview and 26% have not.
Yes. Good job, guys. That's awesome. So what I want you to do for the people who have done this before is I want you to leverage it for this purpose that we're talking about now. And remember, and then we'll go to the next slide here for just a second, remember that it's really helpful, not just for narrowing down the ideas, but what do I need to do to put my best foot forward in my search for this new career path that I'm wanting to consider? Or what is this particular company, what are they looking for right now? So you can really get that insider knowledge regardless of what your goal is with your transition here or your change. You're getting insider knowledge, and make sure that you're tailoring your questions exactly to what you need to know from this person based on your goal, okay? So for the people that have not conducted it, or even for the people that have, if you're starting to feel like, oh, I don't want to do this again, 9 times out of 10, whether it's for informational interviews, everybody, or just making a career change, our clients tell us that they are their biggest obstacle to achieving their career goals. What happens? They say, I'm just too busy, or I'm scared, or I don't feel like I'm qualified for these jobs, or I just don't have time, or I keep forgetting to do it, or, I don't schedule it into my calendar, whatever it is. So one of the things I need you to make sure that you think about, and so I want you to get out your pen right now and think about what typically or has held you back from making a career change in the past and why 2018 will be different. So what's going to be different? And as part of this, everybody, I want you to write down right now what your obstacles are. Is it the fear that I said? Is it that I'm not making the time? Is it that I don't have an accountability partner that, needs to help me stay on task, whatever it is? On the slide here, everybody, while you're thinking about this, these are the typical obstacles we find that get in the way for people of conducting informational interviews and doing it effectively. So if any of these are the case for you, you need to think about these and overcome those. And in addition to these, I want you to make sure you're all aware of like your top 2 obstacles. So think about now what tends to get you into trouble. Are you a procrastinator? Are you a perfectionist, so you never work on it, or you spend too much time on it, whatever it is? And what's going to be different this year? For those of you, just by the way, and then we'll move to the next slide here, a great book for people who are more introverted and are averse to this whole networking thing and conducting informational interviews is Introverted Advantage. I love this book. It helps you learn what you need to do to be more extroverted kind of when you need to and how to manage that effectively. Okay, so that's just a great resource for you. So why is this important? And what I mean by this is conducting these informational interviews and also the networking is it's still the case, even with LinkedIn and everything else online, still 60 to 70% of jobs are landed or secured through the hidden job market. And these are those unadvertised positions through headhunters, recruiters, or networking. Okay. Think about it this way. I heard this at a speech years ago that was great. If you're a hiring manager, do you want to post a job, on Monster or Indeed.com or whatever it is and wade through hundreds of, resumes, even if your HR department is helping you? Or wouldn't it be easier to just walk around your office at the start for just a minute and say, hey, do you know anybody that can help us with this? Right? I have too many stories of clients, finding out about jobs because they've talked to a coworker or a peer. A client in Maryland was talking to a friend of his who worked in the same industry at a different company, and that company was looking to hire someone, but they were going to fire the person in that current position. So it's kind of a tough story. But they wanted to find somebody or at least have some ideas about who could get into that job first. He found out about that through talking to people, okay? So you need to keep this in mind that even if you're more introverted, and by the way, everybody, I'm more introverted than extroverted. I'm 40-60, so I'm 60% introverted, 40% extroverted. And it can be hard for me to push myself. So just please know I understand. Go one by one. That's okay. It doesn't have to be like you're talking to a bunch of people at once. Get one under your belt and then keep going. One thing I wanted to tell you, going back to the career model with these informational interviews, in terms of narrowing down your ideas and learning how to enhance your search, you can find these things out. Okay, so these are some of the questions that you might ask. What's the work environment like? You can ask a little bit about compensation. Just ask them for a range. You can ask them what the work environment is like and if it's a fit for your personality, if the role is, okay? And if it's realistic, what the skills are that are required for this job. And again, like I said a moment ago, how to put your best foot forward in your search. So these give you some clues to what you can ask about in your informational interviews, okay? Then you want to I'm going to give you just a couple of basics here, and then we'll move to the next step. Some of the basics obviously start with people you know. Be specific with them, okay? And what I mean by that is tell them, I would like to conduct an informational interview with you. I'm looking for 10 to 15 minutes of your time. You're not looking for hours of their time. Tell them what the questions are in advance. I always appreciate it when someone emails me and says, I want to ask you these 4 questions, and then I can be prepared for it, and I know that the time is going to be well spent. So send the questions in advance. Obviously, be professional. If you're meeting them in person, dress professionally, and always follow up and stay in touch with them in some way, shape, or form. Ask them if it's okay to do so. Design the alliance, so to speak, with them. Design how you can follow up with them, and if they're okay with that, okay, just ask. All right? And remember, Alumni Network is really helpful for this. LinkedIn connections are helpful as well, okay? These are the 5 basic steps to conduct these informational interviews. You identify where you're going to get these people to meet with. You set it up and prepare in advance. You conduct it. You stay in touch. And you have to stay organized, meaning keep very good track of who you have spoken to, what they said to you, and what the follow-up action item is in an Excel spreadsheet where you can track everything. Because if you and when you follow up with them, and if you hear from them, I should say, too, you need to know what you guys talked about, okay? Finally, in terms of connections, these are the places you can find connections. We talked about some of these already. Association meetings, by the way, everybody, is a great way to find new connections. People tend to forget about that one, okay? And then we talked about how to conduct them. They could be any of these options. I don't prefer email, but sometimes that's the only way people are willing to ask you questions. It's better to get some answers than none. So if email is their preferred method, it's okay to just go with it, okay? And then, the last slide on conducting informational interviews is letting them know very clearly you're looking for information, not a job. Send them the questions in advance. Let them know you intend to keep it brief, just like we said before, okay? I will say one quick thing here at the bottom here. I did have a client once who was prepared for about 20 minutes of the person's time, and the guy set aside an hour to talk to him. Luckily, he had some additional questions prepared. So be ready for that and be very clear with them about, when you meet with them or get on the phone with them, how much time do you have today? I want to be mindful of your time. And you keep track of time, okay? Don't make them do it. So this is part of being professional and handling these effectively, okay? So just, again, as we said before, these are the 5 steps you need to consider and make sure you keep track of or stay on track with in terms of conducting informational interviews, okay? And then the last 2 are staying in touch and staying organized. Okay, so let's move to step number 3 in developing your brand and your materials. So once you're getting into job search mode, you're ready to start thinking about making the change and putting the wheels in motion, you want to go ahead and use the career model again for this purpose. Who am I? What results do I achieve? These are the sections, if you will, from the model, and then you would add results, of course, too, that you can pull from to say, okay, what is my brand here? All right. So you need to think about what your strengths are, your personality type, what your values are. That can be part of it too. This is why I love what I do, because these are the things that are important to me. I'm passionate about helping clients with this issue or whatever it is. You can bring up your education if it's relevant. You talk about your past experience as well, and then obviously the results that you achieve for the people you work for and with, okay? So thinking about your brand, that's how you start on that piece of it. You also want to, in terms of branding, check your online presence. This statistic is pretty high. A lot of employers will turn down candidates because if they find something negative online, not good. Do these 3 steps. Google yourself, check Facebook, all the other things, and review and update LinkedIn as appropriate, okay? Nothing that looks unprofessional and that you would not want an employer to see. I'm not going to read through these slides, everybody, because you'll be able to read them on the recording, but also just email me for the presentation. But these are some tips to revise and update your resume and LinkedIn profile, okay? It's about branding. You need to make sure you include keywords and have a summary at the top. These are the things, kind of the basics, that we want our clients to have in terms of their resume. That's what this is first, okay? Then the second piece here, in terms of your LinkedIn profile, the summary at the top of LinkedIn, everybody, can be a little bit more personal. You can use I in first person in LinkedIn, whereas in a resume, you don't use first person, okay? So it can be a little bit more about you and kind of from the heart. These are the things you want to make sure are present and accounted for in terms of LinkedIn. Have a friend or a coach read your resume and LinkedIn to make sure spelling. I can't tell you how many times I'll read a client's resume and there's basic spelling errors just because, gosh, they can't see it anymore. They've been looking at it so much. It's understandable. It happens. So you need to make sure that you get some help and review from it, okay? Finally, in terms of your materials, you want to develop your elevator pitch. You guys know what this is already, okay? This is the definition, the length of an elevator ride, all this. But remember, it should highlight the benefits that you provide, and remember to focus on the results. When I give presentations in person and they go around the room, at these networking events, and they say, okay, give us your elevator speech or pitch, the person will stand up and just ramble. I'm this, I'm looking for that, blah, blah, blah. And it's not short and punchy. This is who I am and the results I achieve. End of story. Mine is, I'm a career coach and I help people find jobs who make them want to jump out of bed in the morning. So you need to have something that is short and sweet and that people are going to remember you for, okay? So don't forget this elevator pitch. The reason why I bring this up, everybody, and then we'll go to step number 4. I bring this up because people work so hard on their resume and LinkedIn and stuff, and then they go to a networking event and they forgot to prepare for it and really have the right things to say where they come off really strong, okay? So you've got to pay attention to that too. The final slide about, or the final step, is writing your transition plan. You've got to have a plan. Don't just jump into this willy-nilly. We have a job search worksheet. Feel free to ask me for it. It's really helpful because all of the tabs are pre-filled out in Excel to tell you what you need to do in terms of your job search. You need to touch each tab every single week and do something in it every single week, okay? But you need to set a schedule, stay organized, make sure your voicemail is professional. You know, it can't sound weird if employers are calling your cell phone. Make sure it sounds good, and don't use the standard "you've reached blah blah blah" with the computer voice. That's not personal, okay? You need it to be your voice. Make sure that you have a job search email address that is professional and a signature automatically in it. Drives me nuts when people don't have a signature line, and that's the only way I can remember how to reach them, and I can't find a way to contact them. So make sure you have that, okay? Make sure that you take care of yourself during your job search and you have an accountability partner, whether it's a coach or a friend or family member. But make sure you have a plan with deadlines and a time frame for when you want to complete this. Okay. I said a lot, everybody. So I'm going to be quiet here in just a second and we'll do Q&A. But I wanted to share this with you, this quote from Michael Jordan. You have to go around your obstacles. Successful people, it's not that they didn't have any obstacles, right? It's that they figured out how to climb over them or get around them, okay? So I want you all to think about your questions, please, but then also write down for us 2 action steps you will take in the next week. Feel free to share those online if you would like. That's fine. But write down 2 things you'll do in the next week. And before we get to the Q&A, I want to share this quote. This is the quote that gets me through the times when I'm wanting to go into my shell and not step out of my comfort zone. Remember, the greatest risk in life is not taking one. I use this quote all the time. This is what helped propel me to make my career change. I was like, forget it. I'm not staying in this job that I hate any longer. I've got to take the risk. Okay, so we'll give you some time to think here about Q&A. I did want to mention, or I should say questions, I did want to mention we have an amazing Identify Your Ideal Career webinar series coming up. It's only for Vanderbilt alumni, so you'll be able to network in it as well. This is a fantastic program, and I'm not just saying it. We get rave reviews. These are quotes from actual people who participated. They love this program. It's interactive webinar, not like today where you're on mute. Everyone is talking, you're getting coached. It's also very structured to achieve certain goals. You get our workbook with it. And these are some of the jobs that people have secured after this program at some of these companies. These are just some examples, okay? To get the link to register or to talk to me more about this, feel free to email me. It starts January 31st. It's a fantastic program. Happy to talk to any of you about it.
And I'll just echo what Hallie said. We continue to offer this every semester because we get such great feedback from alumni about how beneficial it is. So highly recommend if you're looking for a more guided, structured approach to changing careers to check out this program and consider talking to Hallie for a minute just about the program.
Yeah. I have to tell you, Drew, I don't know if I said this, but before to you, but one of the Vanderbilt alumni, like board members, participated in this group a few years ago, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, we need to do this all the time." So it's really great. So feel free to ask me questions, guys, if you need. So Drew, read the questions if there are any, please.
We don't have any that have come in yet, so
maybe we answered everything. We'll see.
But we'll give it a few minutes. Oh, here we go.
Yep.
Any advice for folks looking to make a career change into a new field where their lack of experience seems to be quite a big hurdle to overcome?
Yes, great question. So in some cases, just being very honest, like you need to ask yourself, am I able to get this experience easily enough, or is the career path just not going to happen? If you want to try or at least find out, so first of all, you want to conduct the informational interviews to find out more like how important that experience is and get some ideas about how you can get it. Is it through an internship? Is it part-time work on the side? Can you freelance? Can you volunteer to get it? Do you need to take some classes maybe, and that can help count as experience? I've actually had some clients do volunteer or remote volunteering. A woman here in Atlanta volunteered for about 3 months to work on a website for a nonprofit out in California. She got references from the company, from the group leader that she put on her resume. It was actually great. So in some cases, you can gain that experience. It just may take time. And the examples I gave a moment ago are ways that you can do that. Another way that you can identify like what experience might be required is look at other people's LinkedIn profiles that do that job and find out what past experience they've had and where they got it, because it could give you some ideas. So those are some starting points for it. And I'll tell you, we've had people transition, make pretty big leaps. A guy that worked at Bloomberg and went into medical device sales. It took him 2 years. Once he figured out what he wanted to do to kind of network his way in and really figure out how to sell himself, but he was able to do it. And another client who worked at NBC Sports, she helps with ad placement, and now she is a corporate real estate leasing kind of manager or person. She worked for her first job, it's funny, was at Sizzler. And she helped, figure out where to place their restaurants and that kind of thing. But she was able to convince them that ad placement is target audience and market and demographics, similar to what they were doing. And she talked with people and revised her resume towards that path and got the job. And now she manages all of the leases for the Gap Incorporated for all of the Southeast, like huge job now. So it is possible. You just have to really dig in deep and figure out how to get that experience.
Great. Here's another one that came in. Would you recommend having a one-page resume, or is a two-page resume okay?
2-page I prefer. 1 page is typically for a recent college grad. So if you've had a few years of work experience, like 2 or more, I go to 2 pages.
Great. Here's one more. Do you have advice for someone who has been out of the paid job market for a while and has been doing volunteer work?
I would
or a
put
lot
the
of volunteer work.
Yeah, good. So it's good that you did that, a lot of volunteer work. What I would do is make sure that you're highlighting in your summary at the top of your resume what your qualifications are and who you are. So sell yourself and brand yourself in that summary at the top based on what your past experience has been, volunteer-wise and otherwise. And then I would list your volunteer work on there and pull out, almost like a job description, pull out the skills that you used and the experience that you gained. I would definitely put that piece on there too, and put the dates. Be clear that it was volunteer work, right? And put that in there. But explain to them in your cover letter as well, what happened and why you've been doing this volunteer work, and the skills and experience you gained from that.
Okay, and here's another good question that we had. Any suggestions for individuals with too much education? I have a PhD, but am completely open to taking a more entry-level position in order to get my foot in the door in my chosen career area, but have found that my PhD is making that difficult.
Yep, great question. I had a client, and just perfect example, she had the same situation, and she just didn't list it on her resume. She took it off. Here's my thing about this. You cannot lie on your resume, clearly, right? That's unacceptable. But the resume is only supposed to be the relevant information. You can tell them you have a PhD in the interview if you feel like you need to be, upfront about that. But if the PhD is not relevant to the job, then take it off, because your resume is only supposed to sell you for that particular job. You don't lie, you don't make things up or add things that aren't true, but you can remove things, and you should. It's just like an old job from high school. Nobody cares about that. You don't put it on there, so you can just take it off.
Okay, and we have one last one that came in, and then we'll wrap up for today. This person asked, how do I explain a gap in my resume? I graduated from a master's program last summer and have yet to find a job. I have a several-month gap on my resume and LinkedIn.
Okay. So explain anything that you've been doing in the meantime, on your resume itself, like if there's any volunteer work or freelance work or anything that you've done, it's okay to list that. If it's something that's not that impressive, then I would just skip it and put the last job that you had. Um, However, in your cover letter, what you can explain is what happened and what you've been doing. So recently graduated, relatively recently, or you graduated from a master's program at this date, and you have been taking the time to really figure out the right next step. So you're going to want to explain it a little bit more in the cover letter. You're not going to write all that out on the resume.
Great. Well, thanks, Hallie, for the wonderful presentation, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. As I mentioned earlier, we will send out a link to your email with a recording of the presentation, and I'll also send out a link to a brief survey. We'd really appreciate your feedback and suggestions for other ways that we can support your professional development. Thanks again, and best of luck to all of you as you pursue a career change in 2018. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.